For as long as I could remember, I've always wanted to make a cutting board. In 7th grade, when I had my first woodworking shop, that was one of the projects that we could choose from. At the time, my brother was really into playing the guitar, so I saw a guitar template and a picture of a past project a student made of a guitar clock, and I just immediately gravitated towards that because I loved my older brother so much and really just was inspired by him playing the guitar and went with that project instead. I sat along my peers that were making their cutting boards at the time, and I didn't know I would get into cooking so much later on in my life, so much so that I ended up going to culinary school and cooked professionally for about 10 years. Because of that, I've been really missing my commercial sized cutting boards that I got used to, where I'd have so much space and so much room to work with. I also wanted something that would look really aesthetically pleasing on my countertop that can just permanently stay there, that will always serve as a place to cut anything on and work with. And I thought there's no other wood in my garage that would fit this better than Douglas fir. I know this is a controversial topic with cutting boards. Softwood is typically not used, but I was like, I had so much of it left over, and I do actually love the thick grain pattern that you get with these farmed woods. And I was like, why not? It's my first cutting board I'm gonna make. It's gonna be in grain butcher block, and it's gonna turn out pretty regardless. And it's wood, for Christ's sake. Like what's more primitive than cutting on a piece of wood? And that's what we're doing. So this video is about this project. I really enjoyed doing this. It came out right in time for Mother's Day. I got to get it partially done up with a whipped feta dip and some vegetables and crackers, and here's the video documenting all of the building behind it and a couple food shots at the end. So please stay tuned and tell me why I did wrong with the Douglas fir instead of a hardwood. And if you want to see a hardwood cutting board, let me know. I will gladly make one, probably for one of my siblings or maybe to sell. To start off on using construction lumber to make a cutting board, you really have to plane off all the rounded corners that are standard with 2x4 lumber. And that's all you see me doing here. It is a kind of time-intensive process, and before I did this, I actually kind of went and invested like $100 into getting a little bit of better dust collection stuff set up, because I knew how much dust it's going to generate. Once we get all the edges of the Douglas fir planed down and square with each other, we then went straight to gluing them up. I don't want to lie to you, my glue that I used for this first board glue up is so old. It has to be at least 4 or 5 years old at this point, and with the Arizona summer heat and it just sitting in the garage, it kind of got a little chunky on me. I tried to break it up as best as I could, and really had no problems with it overall. It clamped well, it dripped a little bit, and it cured really fast because it was already kind of just dehydrated. But yeah, this glue, if you look at it, is just so chunky, and I'm happy I didn't waste any of it though, and it all got to use. So kudos to this cutting board for sticking together and the glue actually being a solid bond. I also want to chime in and say my glue up throughout this whole video, both right now and later on, is just horrendous. I was trying to cut corners, I guess. Not really. I think I was being lazy more than anything. I didn't want to do a whole nother glue up section where I glued the board with like 8 pieces to the board with 3 pieces. Instead, I cut them all down and glued them all at once. And because of that, it was kind of a nightmare. I managed to scrape everything together and keep it relatively organized. I didn't really get too much of a bow in the wood, nor did the actual slats slide out of alignment by too much. It was maybe a 1/4 inch at most. But yeah, like don't follow this technique. It's really not good. So after this glue up, this is typically where the edge grain cutting boards kind of are almost done. And this is why butcher block end grain is so expensive, is because you have to repeat a whole glue up process and planing process. And because it's end grain and the grain is facing up, you can't just plane it with a regular planer, because then you risk the chance of chipping the edge way off and ruining your whole cutting board. And because of that, it just requires a lot more time and attention, and that's made up with the cost, evidently. But you see me right here. I'm just planing the glue up blanks now and making sure that the edges of the slats are now planed flat as well, so that I can glue all those up again and then cut it with the miter saw and then glue up again later down the line. And now we're on to the fun part of seeing the grain pattern that you're going to have show for your actual cutting board, and that's cutting the blanks now with the miter saw so that I can glue them up again. And this process was kind of a nightmare. I think you can tell by how my planer is planing and my miter saw is cutting. I really don't have like good electricity like flow in my garage. I trip my surge protector constantly during this, and I managed to melt an old extension cord that I've had for probably about a decade now and ruin it. Unfortunately, because I'm renting this house and I don't own it, I don't want to do any electrical work in the garage, and that's no fun because I'm constantly ruining my, or I wouldn't say ruining, but constantly tripping my surge protectors and not getting the actual power that's needed from my tools that I have. This is just something I'm gonna have to deal with until I own my house, which we're looking at probably in a year or two for that goal. And I'm happy because my wife knows that I'm really into this stuff, and she's very supportive of giving me my half of garage for the shop. And her sacrifices, her car gets dusty sometimes, but we all make sacrifices for the people and things we love. So here comes the time of me thinking I'm clever by using wax paper to glue up a blank on my CNC table, and boy was I wrong. Because I got new glue and the glue was much more fluid and less viscous, I really struggled on trying to get the glue to not drip everywhere and not get everywhere. And because of that, like, the paper ended up getting crumpled into the cracks, and I just kind of had to abandon ship, set up my sawhorses, and glue it up on the sawhorses. This worked out great, and fortunately for me, I really didn't mess it up too bad, but I would not recommend this to anyone. And I've been watching woodworking videos forever, and I've never seen anyone use it, and I guess it makes sense. I'm just never going to use that again. I hopefully will get a big enough space to do this in the future where I'll have like a glue up station, because I love boards being glued up together. Like, there's such a cool look to it, and I love butcher block and countertop, like wooden countertop looks. Like, I want to do a big walnut table with that type of look. But I digress. Just don't do this. Here I am sort of freaking out at this moment, realizing I need to clamp pressure on both sides because I have that 3 wide block that I need to glue to the 8 wide block, and I don't think I have enough clamps for it. So I'm like, oh crap, I need to rechange and rethink everything I'm doing and go grab as many clamps as I have, and and I abandoned ship and went to the floor. But then I show you a little clip of me having it up on the sawhorses to let it drip, and I have pressure on everything that I possibly can have pressure on, and it ended up turning out fine. here's to another new skill I get to add in my tool house. I've never done this with a router and a big flattening bit, and this turned out really cool and great. My initial plans were to do this on the CNC, but it turns out my CNC can't do a 3 to 4 inch thick butcher block cutting board. It just doesn't have enough Z value, I guess. It can't get, the router can't get high enough off the table. I probably could fix that or upgrade this. I haven't looked into it. I don't know if I will, just because I don't justify using it enough. I feel cheaty when I use my CNC. And maybe you guys with CNCs out there can understand that feeling a little bit. But in this case, it would have been great because it's just flattening something and it's completely parallel. The problem that I did run into here is the slight bend that the aluminum cross pieces had in them made my board a little bit concave, and it's so minor, and I actually like the look of it now more than I think I would have just a normal flat board. It kind of gives it a little bit more character, and it still works, so I'm not going to complain too much. It's literally like maybe an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/16 of an inch from the edges to the middle of the board. It's so minor and small, but it was enough for me to be like, oh yeah, this is not perfectly flat. But all in all, this was such a fun process for me because it's like sanding. It's like equivalent to finishing your table. You get to really clear off all the glue marks, all the scuffs, and start seeing the grain pattern really pop, and you get to watch it get flat. And I just think there's something really fun about kind of cleaning a window so you can see more clearly through it, and that's kind of the equivalent here with this planing process. You get to see the bright color of the board, and it was just so pretty and worked out great, and really can't complain. I'll totally do this in the future. Now we're moving on to the finishing touches of the board for the most part. This is me cutting the edges of the board to straighten it all out and make sure everything is roughly 90 degrees. Having a table saw here would have been really nice, but I got rid of mine because it caught on fire due to the dust collection failure that the previous owner installed on it. And I kind of made a deal with myself that I would not get a table saw until I had a saw stop. So I'm just saving up money and waiting to buy one of those here in the future. But I made do with the tools I had, and everything turned out pretty dang nice. I was off by, again, like a 1/16 of an inch at the end of it all when just measuring the tape measure across the whole length of it. And you as the viewer and me as the owner really can't notice that if it's just sitting in my house on the countertop. So it all worked out good is what I'm trying to get at. Just watching this back in editing, I get to realize how long it takes to actually sand. This is one clip of, I think, about the 5 or 6 different times I went out in the garage and started sanding. I'm currently in this clip sanding 60 and 100 grit, and then I'm going to route the edges after it, and then I finish it off with 180 and 240 and ensure I get all the routed edges as well so that everything is uniform and nice. But man, ingrain is no joke when it comes to sanding, and as I stated earlier, this is soft wood. If this was a harder wood, it'd just take even longer. All in all, it worked out. It just took a little bit more elbow grease and having my hand tingle from all the vibrations of my orbital palm sander just vibrating a lot, but it's worth it. Now is routing the edges with a just slight roundover bit. This one is actually meant for cabinetry, and it has I think it's a 1/4 inch radius, and then it has a flat top, flat edge on the top. But I was originally going to do a 45 degree router bit, and I don't have one anymore. I think mine broke, if I recall, and I went looking for it and I just couldn't find it. So I decreased the one that's meant for cabinetry just down to its slightest roundover so that it'll give me some sort of profile that I can just kind of sand to match everywhere. And I think this turned out great and looks nice, and it's going to protect the edges. And that's primarily why you want to route these cutting boards, is because They are ingrain, and if you cut into ingrain on any piece of wood, you'll realize it's actually kind of easy to splinter off. And I'm not going to go and use my cutting board as like a something I'd use like an axe on, but that is always a concern. And you know, maybe one day you'll drop it or something, and you don't want it to chip off. And routing the edges of that just kind of protects that chance of getting a good splitting force on the edge from occurring. So that's why I did this. And also it's just smooth, man. Like 240 grit sandpaper on any type of wood, you'll feel it and just feels so nice and soft. And having the little rounded edges just makes it all that much better. Here's to the best part of the project, which is finishing the project. I'm applying some butcher block oil that I bought at Home Depot. This thing is soaking all of it up because ingrain, if you can imagine, is like a bunch of straws aimed up, and you're applying that oil on the top of those straws, and those straws are just going to soak all of that oil up. And ingrain's no different, and that's what you see here. It's just soaking everything up. I've now applied it almost every morning or once a day since I finished this project, and it's been about 4 days now, I think, around there. Man, it's still soaking up the oil. I'm kind of mind-boggled by how much it's taking up, but at the same time cool, because the more it takes up, the better preserved it's going to be, and you know, the better it's going to function without getting stained or anything. So I'm happy about it. So here's to the money shots and wrapping up this video. Thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your week. Peace.